meantime, Katie will collate the responses that she has from your surveys.
Yep, send me your surveys, please.
Okay. Katie, you want to launch us? Is there anything
Sure, yeah, so I'm starting the recording. Welcome to our forum, week 7. We're talking about social inequality, and I can tell you guys are really interested in this subject from the responses you gave me via email about inequality in Vietnam. And Dan is also really engaged in this subject, so he has prepared a very good, challenging PowerPoint. And then we will go into breakout rooms. But Dan, off to you.
All right. Good morning, everybody. And thanks for the responses that you were sending to Katie, and she forwarded those to me. And it was really helpful to read those and think about those before coming to the forum this morning. So that kind of advanced work before the forum is really, really helpful. So An and Angvi and Ian, everybody who contributed in that way, perfect. Thank you. So let me turn to the PowerPoint and we can begin our discussion. I will jump in and out of the PowerPoint a couple of times so that we can have some discussion. Okay, here we are already at week 7. So we have 3 more to go, 8, 9, and 10. And in one of those forums, I hope we can include Dr. Sun. And also in one of those forums, I'll participate. Well, after our 10th forum, the 11th week, I'll be in Can Tho. So let's see if we can have a meeting of everybody who participated in the forums. All right, 10 topics. This week we're doing reducing inequality. In the weeks ahead, we've got health, food, water, and power, then entertainment and IT, and then the 24th to the 30th, I'll be in Can Tho. And I just want to say, of all of our topics so far, this has been the most challenging. And I think in that challenge, we have the most opportunity to do something really good. Our framing of the chapters, again, is laid out here. And what I want you to think about as we go through today's hour and a half together, who and what would be the profile for expressing reduced inequality. So as we think of photographing and profiling somebody from the Delta on reducing inequality, who do we choose? Are we choosing somebody that exemplifies inequality, or are we choosing somebody who has reduced inequality? And when we get down to the last couple of pages of the chapter, and we look at classes of students in schools, who are we choosing? What do we mean to model through bending bamboo of reducing inequality? And this is really an important question. We're trying to profile innovative, creative, imaginative, curious attributes of people and communities in the Delta that is changing. And so these are the attributes that we talked about last week and the week before of the profile. But as we think about the role of education and even of bending bamboo, what are we doing to improve or maybe even complicate the inequality of the Delta? So again, whose story will illustrate what this topic should convey? How do we feature reduction of inequality? On the left, I have some pictures that kind of suggest what's going on with gender. The poster there is a famous World War II poster, We Can Do It. She is called Rosie the Riveter, and this was a poster that was common in World War II because women, for the first time, started filling factory jobs that traditionally men had filled. And that really changed gender roles in the United States. But that was World War II. That's 70 years ago. And while women started filling men's jobs 70 years ago in the United States, women today still do not earn anywhere close to what men earn for doing the same work. So gender inequality was addressed from the 1940s all the way to 2018 today, but there is still a long way to go. Here are a couple of pictures of urbanization in Vietnam. These are women from the countryside who now work in construction in the city, but do they earn the same as men earn in construction in Vietnam? Or is it half as much? And are women consigned to certain kinds of jobs and men are taking a different type of job with the urbanization of Vietnam? And over on the right-hand side, what is the difference between urban and rural? So here we have Les One Boulevard and the Cathedral of Notre Dame, and clearly people doing pretty well in Ho Chi Minh City, but also right alongside people who are still growing the rice and harvesting the rice and earning a tiny, tiny fraction of the income of people in Ho Chi Minh City. Another image of urban and rural. Everybody is familiar with the new developments there in Ho Chi Minh City, and the most beautiful parkland in Ho Chi Minh City is for the wealthiest people who can live in that community, whereas the reality of many people in Ho Chi Minh City and in the countryside is poverty. Here are a couple of figures of rural declared income versus countrywide. So on the left, 3/4 of people who live in the countryside are part of the bottom of the pyramid. Bottom of the pyramid means they are earning substantially less than the affluent and middle class people of Vietnam. The graph on the right is for the country overall, and you can see that 1.5% of Vietnam's population is considered wealthy, and 98.5% are not considered wealthy. So 2/3 of Vietnam's population is eking out a day-to-day existence, while 5% are wealthy and affluent. There's a piece of data that I found this morning from March 2018. Ho Chi Minh City workers on average earned $456 a month in 2017. $456 per month. That's 38% more than the national average. And that national average covers up the rural-urban divide. So it may be 38% more than the national average, but it is many times more than the national rural average. Katie gave you a really good introductory Khan Academy video to watch, and I've got that copied here as well. And I hope you've all watched it, but what that Khan Academy video demonstrates is the complexity of social inequality. So I've just done let me go back. I've done a screen capture of the last frame of the Khan Academy video that Katie sent you. Before we go into this, let me just stop screen share and see if there are any questions or comments so far, because there is a lot in that short Khan Academy video. Any questions or comments first? Okay, let's go to Khan Academy. The first point is made, so we'll start here in the top right corner. In the United States, social inequality is evident by the uneven distribution of income. So the top 20% of income earners in the United States control 72% of US wealth. And the bottom 20% control just 3% of US wealth. So that's a differential of 25 to 1. the top 20%, the bottom 20%. And that compounds year after year. So the uneven distribution gets worse each year. So the second diagram in the top right, that income and wealth distribution create an upper, middle, and lower class. And that's not just in terms of income and wealth, but it is an inequality in terms of education and healthcare and services too. And there are many other things that are demonstrated by the unequal distribution of goods, upper to middle to lower. So education, healthcare, and services translates to every possible opportunity you might have in your life. Look at those three things that the Khan Academy identifies: education, healthcare, and services. Education was the first thing they brought up. So education, which we are all about with Bending Bamboo, is the key variable in whether we make better or make worse the uneven distribution. So the third part of the Khan Academy was saying that race and ethnic minorities fare even worse than the normal upper, middle, and lower class. And they have a disproportionate lower income, lower education, lower healthcare. Poverty is what results, and poverty is the compounding day after day, month after month, year after year inequality that grows. The fourth point that is made is that this is most evident in gender. So women not only earn less for the exact same work that men do, but women hit a ceiling at work. There are things they're not even allowed to try to do in most cases. They are jobs, they are opportunities, services, educational opportunities that to men. The next point is that this creates then segregated neighborhoods. People live either among people who share the same kinds of income and wealth distribution, educational, healthcare, and service opportunities, or they live in a neighborhood of people who share inaccess, no access to those things. And that becomes politically disempowered. They are socially excluded. And the last point of the Khan Academy is that this then creates the need for government policy to create access to education, to create access to better healthcare, to more services, to develop ways to allow poor people to integrate into society, or racial or ethnic minority people to integrate into society. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for a second to see if there are any questions, but then I have a comment and a question based on this Khan Academy presentation. Any questions or comments? You can see the process of what leads to what. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 variables compound the inequality. Any comments or questions? Okay, here's my comment. I think it's all about education. So Khan Academy, I can move this out of the way. I don't know if that changes what you see. But the last thing says, because of these compounding social inequalities, you need government policy to create access to education and health, to develop ways to allow integration into society. I would say that has to be the first point, not what we get to at the end. That has to be the very, very first point, because everything follows from access to knowledge, use of knowledge, access to skills, use of those skills. It can't be the result. It has to be the first factor. Your thoughts? I don't want this to be a monologue. If it is, then I am just living out social inequality. And I need coffee.
I agree with you about education. Over here, last week we were talking about it in lecture, and education is the first most important factor to reduce inequality, because they say one thing is like, what is the difference between salary? It's education. PhD earning, PhD people earning different than like high school student, graduate, stuff like that. But yeah, agree, totally over here. Education. I'm sorry, I'm sick. So.
And think of how powerful education is. In the United States, parents will spend a lot of money to get their preschooler, their little child, their infant, their toddler into a special school so that they get into a better kindergarten, so that they get into a better first grade and middle school and high school and university and job. It all starts with educational opportunity or lack of access to equal education. And this points the finger right at us. What does bending bamboo stand for? If bending bamboo becomes something which is an opportunity for only a small number of people, then we are creating more inequality. This week, Liz and I had a lot of correspondence with somebody from Can Tho who wants to take us away from bending bamboo and put us into a really wonderful program using all the things that we're doing with bending bamboo and sell it to an elite group of families in Can Tho. And if that were the case, it would create greater inequality. This person is really creative. This person is full of energy and wants to do great education and wants to earn a good income and wants to hire good people and get the best resources. And all of those contribute to greater inequality. So Liz and I politely said, your goals are the of our goals. We understand your motivation. We understand that you want the highest standard, but we really are going in opposite directions. And this person is Vietnamese. This person is born of and will live their whole life in Can Tho. Liz and I do not. We are foreigners. So it's not for us to judge what that person wishes to do as a professional educator in Can Tho, or to make judgment on what anybody is doing with their profession in Can Tho. But we can, with you, decide whether or not bending bamboo becomes a platform and a process to create equality or greater inequality.
Phải làm thêm cái chuyện này nữa. Nói chuyện với ông hả? Đâu rồi? Xe đừng có mà nói lấy xe. Ai hay vậy? No, not sure.
Okay, Katie, I think you need to rein in the audio there of.
Yeah, I muted her.
Okay. This is a terribly important point. Tu, what would you like to contribute?
I just go to another starting point they show over there for the poverty. Maybe in the reality we can have a different starting point. For example, in Vĩnh Long, they have been dealing with the problem of some of the secondary school children left the school for jobs, for little earnings for the family. So I know that the education become like offered quite freely for them, spare the afternoon for them to work, but they decided to leave school just for the very first of the priority of their family. to earn the money because they don't see the future of education. I just go from another, like angle to see the critic when we thinking of the education to base on. Like in Vietnam, we still have that group of people who have different priority, and the arrangement in the society makes some ironic situation. What I have been working with the parents of my access kids, I can see that like some of the people who don't have a high education, but they still accept very cheap, like pay hours, and they ready to certify the free, education we offer to their kid, to with the perspective that they can make their future like different. So not only poverty, but also the way the parent thinking of the future of education too.
Excellent. Education is a long-term investment of a family. Education that you commit to today means you are delaying other things, entertainment or playing or watching a video, because you're focused on education. Or the family is delaying spending money on a motorcycle because they're spending it on education. I think of your access students in a program that's funded by my government, and it was great to go with your access students to Ho Chi Minh City to the American English Center. And yet what I observed at the American English Center was their goal. It's to peel away the best Vietnamese students and tell them that their real education is in the United States. It's the same as Thanh An, where the further education chapter at level 11, unit 9, tells everybody the best education is in Singapore. In both instances, education is being used to create social inequality, not equality. So, your example of the students in Vinh Long, this is exactly to the story that we were observing at OWN Semiconductor at Bien Hoa in outside of Ho Chi Minh City. All the fact that, so there's 6,000 employees of OWN, and of those 6,000, maybe 5,000 have left the countryside to work in the factory in the special economic zone. How many of those people cut their education short in order to earn money for their family? So if we can use education, bending bamboo, global classrooms, if we can use all of these things to allow access for anyone to quality education, then this one acknowledges that urbanization is happening, industrialization is happening, social inequality exists. Okay, that's number one. But number two, with the right educational and technology balance, we can close the gap. We don't have to assume that the gap will get wider and wider and wider. It might, but we don't have to assume that that will be the result. So those Vinh Long students could still have access to quality education, possibly, if we figure out a way to use global classroom and materials that speak to Vietnam's needs in a good way. Tu, go ahead, you have another comment.
I just give one more instance from a group of young people having the fanciness of very good education. That's it, the graduates. Most of my students, they graduate from the university. Not all of them get the job. Even though the statistics, they can fancy us with that. But when I observe what they really doing, it's just like trying to sell the milk tea, setting up very small business for food. And even one of my students are like talented pianist. He quitted that, you know, passion of that job to do something else, like trying to set up, learn from the economic friends, like all the lecturers over there, and see catering and other, you know, like non-smoke. Sometimes they cannot add the value to the society. I don't know what kind of inequality they're trying to express, but that is one example of the choice, even though you have good education. Because I'm an educator, so I always like concerned with the group who have like without education and with education. What are their priority in the society? And we do
Excellent. How do you add value to your own life? How do you add value to society? Let me share some things that you sent to Katie. So I'll read some of the comments. Ian sent Katie this quote. Oxfam, which is a British NGO, very well respected. Oxfam calculates just how great the economic gap between the richest and poorest has become in Vietnam. The richest man in Vietnam earns more in a day than the poorest Vietnamese person earns in 10 years. And his wealth is so great that he can spend $1 million every day for 6 years before exhausting it. And with great wealth comes great earning potential from savings and assets. So in an hour, 1 hour, the richest Vietnamese person can earn from his wealth 5,000 times more than what the poorest 10% of the Vietnamese people spend every day on their basic needs. All right, so that's Vietnam. In the United States, the gap is even greater. All right, and Anvi sends this. In Vietnam, the most common type of inequality is educational inequality. Children in rural areas and mountainous regions do not have opportunities and access to quality education. They drop out of school to work on the farm to support their family economy. Their lack of education leads to illiteracy, a low quality of human resources for the future. It increases their poverty. And another submission, An was explaining that policies that might be wonderful policies can get corrupted. So even the best intent for access to education or access to health or access to housing, these can all get corrupted. So when you touch the subject of reducing inequality, more than the other 9 topics in Bending Bamboo, this really comes very close to our intent. What are we hoping to accomplish? What the hell is water? Is the water equality? Not just bilingualism. Bilingualism can create inequality because some will have access and others won't. When the French introduced French, it was to create inequality. Colonizers create inequality. When the Chinese required the people to go to Van Meo and study Chinese to be a Mandarin, it created inequality. When the Americans introduced audiolingual centers on their bases during the war years, it created inequality. So how do we create equality with education rather than just make worse the inequality? I have a little bit left to the PowerPoint, but let me take any questions or comments that you have before I finish the PowerPoint.
Can I give a quick comment?
Please.
So I think your last point about education, how can we create equality through education? I want to make that question more specific, is how can English education create more equality? Because there's inequality within Vietnam, but around the world, there's also inequality. And language gives you a step up, an entryway, or a way to open a door. So what we're doing with Bending Bamboo, how can we pair that inclusive education with language education? That's my question. To ponder, you don't have to answer now.
Oh, good, good. I thought we had to answer right now. Well, this, Katie, to your point, this is why Bending Bamboo combines development and language. It's the two together. If we were focused exclusively on the most creative and fun things just to advance language, but did not have 10 topics that we've all agreed on that come out of the Delta, speak to the Delta, and address equality or inequality, then we would blindly be creating another opportunity for a small number of people to have more advantage over other people. You know, I think of my own family. I come from a lower middle class family. My father made it his highest priority to see that we lived in a rich community, because even though we were the very, and this is the truth, we were the very poorest family in a rich community. And I never understood that. Why didn't we live with people that had the same income that we had? I never understood why my father did that. But he did it so that I would have access to a better education, because he knew that the rich community had way better education than a middle class community and a lower middle class community. He knew that, because that was the disadvantage he lived with his whole life. So he wanted to make sure his kids had access to education. So what I learned was this, and this has shaped my whole life, and it has shaped Liz's whole life, and it probably is shaping your lives. But this is what I learned. Education typically is a means to get ahead, to gain advantage, to rise above others. It is not typically something that creates equality. Even think of how we are graded and the rewards you get for a good grade. It pushes some people ahead and it leaves other people behind. Day by day, lesson plan by lesson plan, year by year, education pushes some people ahead, and education typically does not level the playing field. In the United States, maybe more than anywhere, education is used to create inequality. We fund education in the United States on the basis of property tax, not income tax. We build our education on the basis of property tax, which means a wealthy community, which pays more in property tax because property is worth a lot, they have wonderful education. And another community that pays very little or no property tax because it's poor gets worse and worse education. This is one of the major issues in our continuing political battles in the United States. All right, good stuff. And Katie, I like your comment. Let me go back and conclude the PowerPoint so that all of us can get into the breakout sessions. So here's from the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, some global data. And it does this for all countries. So we can track Vietnam and its trends from 1990 to 2018 on what is called the Human Development Index, HDI. And HDI tracks health, education, income, inequality, gender, poverty, work, human security, trade and financial flows, mobility, communication, environment, demography, socioeconomic stability. So look at that graph. That is a national average, and it is an annual score that Vietnam gets. So the score that Vietnam has in 2018 is 0.694. A perfect score is 1.0. The Northern European countries have scores that are close to 1.0. The United States ranks about 25th or 30th on the HDI. It is not at the top. And Vietnam, I looked at this going all the way back to 1976. And Vietnam has climbed a lot on the index, the HDI index, from the 0.40 range to the 0.50 to the 0.69, which is almost 0.70. And in 30 years' time, that is a huge, huge increase in human development. And human development is averaging all of those things that you see on the left, but principally it is averaging people's access to a long and healthy life, people's rising standard of living, and people's access to education and knowledge. Those three things: healthy life, standard of living, access to education and knowledge. Now, on the one hand, this is a really good score compared to where Vietnam was after the American War. On the other hand, these are national averages, so this does not capture the difference between rural and urban, between Ho Chi Minh City and the other parts of the country. This score is also related to the Sustainable Development Goals, and here is my summary of that score. It captures standard of living, education and knowledge, and a long and healthy life. My question then is, what is the intersect of those three things? And how do the 10 topics of Bending Bamboo, which reflect Hang On, TA, and the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN, and is our intersect of those three things, standard of living, education and knowledge, long and healthy life, is that, quote, the water in our parable of the three fish? Everyone is challenged for better and for worse in times of change. This is the result in every country, in every century, of industrialization, urbanization, and migration. So how do we engage change, and whose reality counts as we as educators engage change? The MPI is another way of measuring progress. This is the multidimensional poverty index, MPI. And like the HDI, the Human Development Index, it's looking at health, education, and standard of living. So we have here really good data, really good information about Vietnam, and it is gathered from household surveys, and it tells us whether the country is making progress on equality or inequality. The MPI every year has people conduct and complete a survey. It's a very simple binary response to simple observations. So you can see here that it involves education, health, and living conditions. Those are the three things that the HDI is tracking. Binary means yes or no. On the right, you see just a sample of households: household 1, household 2, household 3, household 4. Household size, how many people? Household 1 has 4 people. Household 2 has 7 people, etc. And then it's a yes or no question, 0 or 1, 0 or 1. And anybody with a grade school education can complete this survey. It's designed to be simple, and a baseline is designed to lead to ongoing surveys. So you take it 1 year, but then you take it the next year and the year after and the year after. And this creates year-to-year data, and data tells us whether we are becoming more equal or less equal. It leads to analysis, synthesis, it leads to a good narrative, and it leads to our valuation of how we're doing with education and development. So here are questions to wrestle with. Does access to SLA, language learning, language acquisition, a brilliant rollout of bending bamboo, does this reduce or increase inequality? How can bending bamboo process for teachers, students, schools, and communities alike? How can our bending bamboo process ensure greater equality in times of change? Historically, education has been a means to get ahead, not something to level the playing field. So how can every aspect of bending bamboo be good for all? What the hell is water? Is it reduced inequality? Is it growing opportunity for all? All right. A lot to think about. It's all in your hands now. I'm just going to watch and listen.
Okay, everybody. To make sure we have enough time for our breakout rooms, we're going to go into them now. As always, my Can Tho 7, please record. Except for Anne, I've given you recording power this time, and I'm also telling you, you can't be the reporter this time. Okay? So yeah, you have the assignments. The assignment, it was attached to the email. I actually attached it this time. And you will have 30 minutes in your breakout room. Let me throw you into those now. Okay. Always tall. Tall. Go into your breakout room.
We haven't seen his face, so I'm not sure he's there.
Yeah.
Okay, Katie, we've got 30 minutes. I'm going to take Alex over to Regis, and then I'll come back.
Okay, great. See ya.
I'll leave my computer on, but mute and stop video. Ciao.
Yes.
You know, even we know a lot of inequality in the society, but it's hard to address it specifically.
Yeah, well, we can't talk about all of it at once, but when we focus on one aspect in your mind, I think it brings out a broader awareness. You can see it for gender, you can say, oh, I also see it for ethnic minorities or high to low income.
Mm-hmm.
It puts into perspective our whole purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So not one lesson plan or not one unit is going to take care of inequality. But if we can use this as a lens to think about our entire approach to language learning and development learning, and toward what end we are doing this, then every step that we take, even if it seems very small, every learning objective, even if it seems very, very tiny, is part of a larger endeavor, and that is to reduce inequality.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's, I want to hear from you guys about your discussions. Who are my reporters?
Yes, me.
Min Chang. Who else?
Yeah.
From
Lin.
True News Group. Who?
Lin.
Lean.
Yes.
Okay. Who else? Han.
Han.
And then we should have one more.
You?
You? Okay. Okay, so again, I want to know who you are choosing to focus on for your narrative, and what type of inequality are they facing? Is it gender, income, education, all of the above, rural, urban? Okay. So let's start with Miss Lin. Tolien.
Yes, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Our discussion, we will introduce some students in Vĩnh Châu, Sóc Trăng because of their income and education is low. It's in rural area. Okay, and we will ask some interviews. We ask some students some questions to interview them. About, for example, what do you want to do after graduate school? What difficulty are you facing? How do you find the solution of this difficulty and something like that? And then we based on in some background situation of them to develop this question and have two videos about inequality, and we will link it into our report.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I like that you're focusing on the student's perspective and forward-looking,
Yes.
maybe how they perceive inequality in their future. And then let's go to Min Trang.
Our group just discussed about the group of the people living on the river, like in Kairan floating market.
Good.
As you know that in Kairan floating market, there are some of floating family living on the boat, and also they living on the floating house, and there's the price of social inequalities for the children there, because in children there they don't have like the advantage to go to school or to have some of the health insurance or civic engagement.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And yeah, and the people living in there, because of their like ancestor cultures, they live based on the waterway cultures, so they just are living from based on the fish, and also from the season, from the tidal level in there.
Great. I have,
And yeah,
sorry, you can continue if you have more.
and for example, they don't have like types of the living condition, like they don't have their proper toilet, they don't have like the pool water for living. And you can say that all of the people in one family, they have to live on a boat, and they move from the area to another area.
Mm-hmm.
And all of their children, maybe they have to suffer about illiteracy.
Mm-hmm. I have two questions, maybe
Yes.
to include in your interview or your narrative outline. Will the family continue to live on the river is one. And oh my gosh, what was my other one? Oh, do they know about the dams that are being constructed upstream? So there's 12 proposed dams on the Mekong River in China, Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. Do these families know about those dams? And how does that impact their daily decision to live on the river?
Yeah. Based on some of the articles and also some of the research that I have read, they also mention about that the people living there, they follow the traditions from their great grandfather or ancestor, so they continue living in that way. And although the government also have some policies to encourage them to settle their life in one place, and for the children to have the good condition to go to school, but they say that they can't, they get bored to live just in one way, just in one place. Yeah.
Yeah,
And they also have the knowledge about the game, but they don't know clearly about the impact from the dam. They just know that because some of the family, they live from Can Tho to Cambodia, or also some household they also from An and they flocked to Cambodia.
Great. I like this. I really like this focus. You're illuminating the connection between culture and inequality. How can we raise equality and still maintain culture? Right? I mean, you're touching on something really important. Okay, thank you, Minh Trang. Let's go to Miss Kim Pan.
Yeah, it's very hard for me to choose exactly one person. So our group choose some types of people. So we have 3 groups of people. The first one, I think about high school undergraduate and high school graduate students. We will discuss about future job opportunities. And the second group is about rural and urban people. We compare about the standard living conditions or income. And the last group may be about male and female of the same education. And when we have an interview, I will ask them some questions like, the first question is, what are the advantages when you find a new job? Or what are the disadvantages when you find a new job? Or how do you overcome your challenges? Do you think you have a fair chance like others to get a job? And do you have any good advice to share to young people?
Great, very good.
And about the background, I think it's better to find out the statistic. Maybe in the article, it's better if you have the numbers of students from Can Tho who didn't pass the entrance exam, and what happened to them, and how successful they are, and vice versa. About some students who passed the entrance exam. I also find out the article, and I will send you the link later.
Okay.
And in my article, they compare about male and female, about boy and girl when they go to higher levels of education. There are some statistics about the percent, how many percent of boys when they go to school and how many percent of girls that they go to school. And also some methods that government can do to support, to balance between girls and boys when they go to school.
Great, yeah, I look forward to reading that article. That's a good point. And I like your focus on it's really hard, like we've all said, to choose one form of inequality. So I'm trying to think about how we can capture this in a narrative, but thank you. And
Yes.
Let's finally go to Miss Hugh. Miss Hugh.
Yes, can you hear me? Yes. The next is not good now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. We talk about gender inequalities in our big family. The typical people we choose, my mom and Miss V's mother. Miss V mother talk about her mom was arranged marriage with a lot of disadvantages like family violence, ignorance, assumption, and a reason her mom have to face some damage in life and have to change their life by move the hometown to to get to conclusivity for the current life. And the second person I want to share to all of the people is my mom. My mom is really an intelligent girl in the past, but she had to be suffered from the gender inequality. In my grandparents' family, all of the male kids had a lot of benefits. They have a lot of good things. They have a lot of opportunity to reach higher education and get a higher position in society. But my mom and my aunts had no chance to do this. Most of them had to stay home and had arranged marriage as well. My mom was not very happy with my marriage, and she said goodbye to my dad when I was 10 years old. And then she often talked about this, and she was very she think that it's very terrible for her and her sister lives because of this inequality. And she did not love her mom much because of this. And now she asked us to try to overcome the problem. And I will design some questions to make an interview. The first one, I will start with the question like, were you satisfied with life in your big family in the past? Or why? Or why not? The second one, my question, did you use to obtain your favorite job? Or why? Or why not? Number 4, I will ask, were there any differences in the right between male and female children in your family in the past? Number 5, I think make comparisons between your family in the past and your family now. And the last one, I asked my mom, what do you think you should do to reduce gender inequality among your kids now? These are on my 5 questions we designed for our narrative. What's about your opinion?
Thank you for sharing, Hugh. I think that your questions are really good, and the context you gave was really personal. You can see everybody on the screen was listening well because it's a personal story. And you did a good job of illuminating inequality, but on a personal level. I really liked that. Thank you for sharing. And thank you to everybody. I think today's forum went really, really well. I can feel how much you want to talk about this subject, and I want to just congratulate you. I'm going to literally cut this part of the forum out of the recording and save it, because we just had a wonderful conversation about a really complex topic in English. And I don't know about you, but like, I'm really amazed by the depth of our discussion. So thank you. Dan, anything to add before we say goodbye? All right.
I just want to agree entirely with what you just concluded. This was evidence of not only interest in the topic, but the teacher's competence and confidence to work together. And so this is evidence that we are moving in a good direction. Next week, we move on to the topic of health, and it will be equally challenging. And it too is a matter of equality and inequality, or access to health in the United States as well as Vietnam. So thank you, everybody.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Sorry we're late.
Good night.
Bye.